Good Sunday evening, everybody, and welcome back once again to another episode of Talking TSR. My name is Chris, your co-host. Pleasure to see. I don't really see anybody when we do this, but hopefully assume that everybody is out there. And as always, to my virtual left is Rick. Rick, say hi to everybody.
Hey, folks, glad we're back in late September, almost October already. I can't believe it.
I know. Is it crazy? We were just talking about how it's unbelievable how time is just zipping away
Right?
here after
Yeah,
the
faster
summer.
and faster.
Yeah, no, it tends to do that. I mean, that's what happens. They always tell you that when you're younger, you never believe them,
Yep,
but boy, is it true. It is totally
so
true.
true.
Really just one main announcement before we get started on today's show. If you guys have not already, check out the OAR number 8 Grimtooth's Old School Traps landing page, which is going to be coming to BackerKit crowdfunding in a couple of weeks. And I think if Elena has that link, she could drop that link in the chat. And it's funny, I didn't actually open up the chat before we started here, so I'll get that fired up while we're going here. And also just to let folks know, we're doing something quite a bit different before this crowdfunding campaign starts, but we are doing a list of pre-launch shows, pre-launch Twitch shows to kind of build the excitement about this. And they will be hosted by Grimtooth himself. And I go into detail and tell you what that actually means, but I think it might be more exciting to actually tune in and see what that means, because it should be quite the experience. And those shows are going to be on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they're going to start this Thursday, which is the 21st, I believe. And they're going to run right up until we launch the crowdfunding. So if you're interested in it, and you want to learn a little bit more about the product and meet some of the designers. There was a huge team of designers on it. That's going to be your opportunity, and also a chance to possibly talk to Grimtooth himself. So what do you got for us, Rick? You got anything?
Yeah. And I'm psyched for those shows. I'm on one of those shows, so I'm hoping I survive.
You
Um,
are.
so 2 shows back, it almost slipped my mind. I did mention a Tops card I had done at Gen Con, at our Gen Con show. Appropriately, I mentioned this custom Tops card. I'm not going to relate the story again, but for those who remember the crazy story behind this card, I figure we can just flash it up if we could, Elena. This was the infamous Wolverine card in which I'm being wounded by Wolverine. So there it is for posterity.
Nice.
One of my more unusual Gen Con memories, where I basically just grabbed another cosplayer, on the spur of the moment and just pulled him into a custom card shot. So sometimes spur of the moment things work out.
Oh, that's very cool. Awesome. That's really neat. So yeah, it's like I saw that picture when we were getting ready for our show, and I'm like, I saw that ink. I'm like, oh my God, wait, are we on the right show here? And I'm like, what does that have to do anything with
Yeah.
what we're gonna talk about tonight? And I'm like, and then I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And I'm like, I remember now.
Well, I
So
try to remember, if I promise to show people something, it totally slipped my mind last show, I'll admit, but then it struck me between shows, and I said, you know what? I never did. I promised people I was going to show them that card, so there we go.
there it is. Okay. So tonight we are talking about the classic adventure I-4, Oasis of the White Palm, number 2 in the Desert of Desolation series, written by Tracy Hickman and Philip Myers. I'm going to start right there. Philip Myers, who? and
Yeah.
and I don't recognize the name at all, and I don't think he did anything after that. Yeah, so I mean that's the first thing I'll throw out there that
Hmm.
apparently Philip Myers was brought in for this, and he was not on the third module because that was I've got it right here. That was just Tracy Hickman, although he did add his middle name for some reason. So but yeah, so that's the first thing. So give me your high level thoughts on the Philip
Sure.
Myers conspiracy and what you think about
Yeah.
this
And
adventure.
and one wonders where the kind of, Myers parts end and the Hickman parts begin.
I want to
Because,
talk about
Tracy
that a little
Hickman,
bit.
yeah, I almost get the sense that Myers kind of maybe did more of the functional stuff, and
Hmm.
Hickman did more, it was more of an idea I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Um, for my own personal taste, I find I'm very mixed on Tracy Hickman's writing because for these old modules, because in some ways I find him occasionally heavy-handed, or he will kind of push the story through the rules, I guess is the
Hmm.
best way I can put it, and make some odd choices. And yet the man has a fantastic imagination. So I'm very mixed, and it shows a little bit in this module. Now, obviously here this module kind of serves as our connective tissue in between two very more dungeon centric, for lack of a better term, parts of the trilogy. And we had a situation here, I think, where this module could have really fallen and just been a low point in the whole series. And I think it performs admirably well for what it's trying to do. um, I found it's very NPC driven, very
Yes.
light on traditional monsters. There seems to be a
Hmm.
whole lot of undead and a whole lot of like whites thrown in here. But if you're looking for a lot of interesting monsters, this may not be the place to shop. But if you're looking for NPC interactions, role playing opportunities, certainly are here to be had in spades. And there are quite a bit, I think, of varied little environments, considering the whole thing is set in the desert. You have the Oasis camp, you've got a kind of tomb environment, you've got a temple, you've got different places going on, a lot more varied, frankly, than the first installment, as much as I
Yes.
love that one.
Yeah.
So nice amount of variety here. But again, I find the writing a little uneven. I guess that would be one of my criticisms, is the
Hmm.
rewards and enticements don't always seem to fit the character level. Because I think, what was this for, six to eight, I think.
Yes, I
And
believe so. Yep,
right.
6 to 8. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I know initially they throw a couple +1 maces, for instance, at the party, and I can't imagine a party of, seventh or eighth level characters would not have decent weaponry of that level or better at that point. And that's there's just some odd choices. There's a drow at one point in a room, sitting here in the middle of the desert. I don't understand that.
Yeah.
uh,
They,
so yeah, I'm very mixed on it, but yeah, absolutely very role play, very NPC driven, lots of intrigue to be had.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I think actually, so we really harped quite a bit last time about the format of this adventure
Hmm.
with the lore, character, monster, trap, trick, and
Hmm.
everything. That kind of format of a different way to present encounters and how well that worked, and it worked very well for the game master. I'm gonna backtrack on that, and that was actually one of the things I really loved a lot about Pharaoh is I don't think it worked as much in this one because I
No,
thought
no.
they used it more and it got very choppy and stuff where instead of
Yep.
saying, the white jumps out and attacks you, it's like the
Hmm.
monster number one jumps out and attacks you. And even to the point where and again, I like the way they did some things. And I
Hmm.
wonder if this is where Mr. Myers kind of came in, where he did things one way and Tracy was kind of doing things another way, and they kind of fought with each other, maybe
Hmm.
competed with each other, possibly. But like with the use of the NPCs and the fact that the NPCs were in the back of the book, I like the fact that the NPCs were in the back of the book. But then when you got
Hmm.
to when the NPCs were presented, the main NPCs, because there was a lot of other NPCs that were not in the back of the book that were in the running text, it got very choppy with like, wait, who is this
Hmm.
person and where are they? Oh, I need to go flip to page 31 to go find out about this person. And to your point with the drow, they actually did mention that the one NPC was allied with the drow, but like it
Okay.
was literally mentioned in passing. It was like
Yeah.
it's like, oh, and by the way, there's a couple of they're allied with the drow, and it's like, oh, okay, kind of almost like I don't know, we got to get drow in here somehow. It's like
Yeah.
how do we get that? But I agree with you. It's definitely an adventure for those who love social interaction encounters
Hmm.
in spades, without a doubt. I mean, the whole first, literally half of the adventure could be, not even a single roll for initiative, just all
Yeah.
interaction and talking to
Yep.
NPCs and get it. I thought, and that was fine. I do agree with you. The diversity of monsters was lacking a little bit. It was a little bland. I think it could have used a few more, for lack of a better word, fun encounters. I think even the random encounter tables when you were moving in the wilderness were also kind of boring too. And I get it. They're supposed to be. It's not as a wild area, untamed area as the first adventure was.
Hmm.
And it's certainly not as a mysterious location as the last adventure set in. So yeah, it did come off a little bit. I think you summed it up best, and it was the connective tissue between the very
Yeah.
strong part one and what I think is, if I recall well, a pretty strong part three. And then there's the, well, you got to get from part one to part three, and how do you do that?
Yeah.
And I kind of equated a little bit to Empire Strikes Back. It's like, if you think about Empire Strikes Back, not a whole lot happens in that movie.
Yeah.
It's like, literally, it's like, they escape from the Hoth base, they're chased through
Hmm.
the asteroids, Luke gets trained, and then they get ambushed
Yeah.
at Bespin. And it's
Hmm.
like, literally, that is the whole movie. And it's like, and at the end of the day, you're like, wow, what was really accomplished here? Well, nothing. We kind of got you from movie one to movie three, and some
I
bad
guess
stuff
that's the
happened.
place, right? I guess that's sort of always the where these middle parts of a trilogy end. They always seem
Yeah.
to be the characters going from here and there, and maybe they stumble into a big fight in the middle, like in, the
Yep.
two towers kind of thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I totally agree regarding the formatting. Frankly, I found it, very distracting in this
Distracting when
installment.
reading it. Yep.
Yeah, it's and
And I
it
didn't
wants to
feel
be
that
good.
way. I did not feel that
No,
way in
I
I3.
agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was lighter in I3.
Yep.
I mean, there too, I felt like it worked in some ways and it didn't work. And I think it was the monster part that jarred me.
Yeah.
I like the separation of lore. I don't
hmm
mind the separation of saying this is the trick or this is, but there are so many instances where NPCs are referred to as monsters, which just somehow jars me a little bit, where I wish
Yeah.
they would just say the Sheik does this instead of saying monster one does this, and then just two lines later telling you that monster one's the Sheik.
Yep.
Because it led me in this position where I was always reading monster one and saying, all right, who's monster one again? And
Yeah.
then there's so many traps and tricks in this. It's very track. Every other room
Yes.
has got, a couple,
Yep.
several traps or things in it where you constantly ran into the situation where it'd say trap one and trap two or trick one and trick two. And then you had to like correlate, all right,
Yeah.
this is trick one and this is trick two. And you had to kind of figure out, you make sure you were, the trick one was the white one when you were reading. And it's just like, they got to a point where I wish they would just said what they needed to say and not put that in between step of me having to line up the label of trap one or monster one with whoever it was. So it
hmm
got a little wearying at the end. Um, but again, I love the intrigue. I love the mystery. I love the fact that the characters are kind of in this foreign place dealing with the Sheik and that role playing element. Um, Again, I wish the monsters would. It feels like such a missed opportunity where here you have this interesting Egyptian place and you're just giving people whites where you could give some people some really interesting Egyptian themed sort of critter, or
Yeah.
mummy variant or something.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess I'm sounding very negative, and I really don't, I'm not. I think there's a lot of good to the module, but the one other thing that really glares out at me was the ending. Now, of course, it depends whether you end it here or whether you go on to the next
Yep.
module and how you play it. But the whole off camera thing with the sort of Jin and Efreet, where you basically the characters, I don't know, I feel like they're sort of robbed of the final confrontation because the Efreet is so powerful that the characters cannot confront the Efreet. So they really kind of have to summon the Jinn, and then the Jinn kind of off camera goes and deals with the Efreet, and it just doesn't strike me as a very satisfactory final battle or conclusion. I can totally imagine my players not being happy with that after
Yeah.
getting all the way to that point and then summoning a Jinn and the Jinn just saying, "Oh yeah, I'll deal with this," and going off, flying off and doing it kind of off camera. I didn't really like that.
Yeah.
That ending, that conclusion, kind of. I wished the characters were a little more involved in that part.
Yeah, and I have to admit, yeah, a couple of things. I think they set up expectations, and in the first adventure, they set up the expectation that there's the three star gems, and I'm like, okay, so
Mhm.
I think there's one in module one, there's one in module two, and then there's going to be one in module three, and then we're going to use the star gems at the end of it. No, it's like there's two in this adventure, and
Mhm.
you have all three of them, and I get it. You need all three of them to go and finish off the task and everything. I get that, but I just found that a little bit like not confusing, but like it just felt strange that we had to kind of put and literally one of the star gems is kind of just lying in a room. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
so it's which again is kind of like an old school kind of a thing, but I felt that that was there was a few things like that, like you said, and you said that
yeah.
ending, that off-screen ending, just reminds me of like I remember the ending of Empire Strikes Back and being like, wait, what really happened? Like this is like not a great ending. It's like this is like
Yeah,
it just felt very like you said, like, well, there's going to be stuff going on, and it's like I'm not part of it, and I'm just watching it. I'm just watching the end of it, basically. So I get that. I get that.
yeah.
Is a
And you
little
could have
bit
had a
confusing.
situation where the characters use the gems on the Efreet,
Yeah,
directly, maybe blast the Efreet with the gem somehow, or
yeah,
something. And you're right. The one gem, right, is just sitting in an ash heap or something,
yeah,
where I guess you got to really hope the characters look in that ash heap because,
yeah.
it's so important. Um,
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
it's
I think
some
that
odd choices.
yeah, I think again, and we are kind of harping on the negative here because like I said, there are a
Yeah.
lot of
Oh,
good things
yeah.
about it. I mean, some of the encounters are top notch. Some of the traps are really
Yep.
cool. I'm sure we're going to talk about them a little bit more.
Hmm.
Again, the NPCs, the interactions are great.
Yeah.
It does fit in with everything. The plot's a little bit tricky to kind of follow along. It's not
Totally.
more. I think it was more confusing reading it as a game master. I think once the game master reads the whole thing and then kind of
Hmm.
digests it all and says, okay, now I know what it is now. And then I think then it's kind of that old school, like Gygax used to do all the time. Here's all the pieces. You figure out how
Hmm.
you're going to disseminate it all to your players and everything. I think there's a
Yeah.
little bit of that going on here where you necessarily don't start, and it's not as clean as say like the first one was Pharaoh, where you were forced into the desert, and then
Yeah.
you eventually come across the pyramid, and you go into the pyramid and you solve the quest and everything, and
Hmm.
return the land to its glory. This one's a little bit more like you got to figure out like, wait, what are we supposed to be doing? We got to go get the,
Yeah.
the the daughter, and it's like, why are we
Hmm.
getting a daughter? And where do we go? And what I always found confusing was the fact that the ending of the adventure, and I'm glad that you kind of jumped in on that. And the ending first, you said that was a little confusing. I was always confused that the ending is in the city of Phoenix, and
Yeah.
we literally get like a paragraph of that
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
ruins. Like and it's like you get everything in the other dungeons, and then it's like you didn't finish. You have to now take everything that you have and go to
Yeah.
this one location in the desert, which doesn't have a map, which doesn't have, it's not fleshed out, it's not,
Yeah.
and then you have to go there and say a magic word, and then the
Yeah.
cover happens. The cover of the adventure
No,
happens.
and I feel like,
um
right. That's such a good point.
yeah,
And because I remember thinking that the city of Phoenix just seemed like a passing afterthought. And again, it's just one more level removed where the players could go off track. And
yes,
as much hint as you're given through the hieroglyphics or ruins and what have you, which I love,
me too.
you have to keep in mind, I think there's like a base 30% chance every time for the characters to, so you have to assume that two-thirds of these runes are not even going to get read. So there's just, I don't know, I feel like functionally there's places where things could go off the rails between the whole situation with the daughter. I wish this was definitely one of these things where if it was remade today, I would love there to be a player list, so to speak,
Yep.
where you had, the main players kind of listed out and what they're up to on one page, or some kind of one page graphic to kind of show who's got the princess and who's doing what and who's,
Yeah.
against who and who's allied with who and that kind of thing, because with the slavers and everybody else running around, there's a lot going on and some of the groups don't even have it straight. So there's even going back and rereading it for this show, I think I always knew this module the least of the three, and I'm starting to understand why. I hate to say, maybe I like things a little more straightforward, but something about the straightforwardness and sort of purity of the first installment. I think the first installment was always my favorite of the three, and now I'm beginning to understand why, because
Yeah.
it is a very clear mission. You're just
Yep.
kind of going into this tomb and trying to beat this unbeatable tomb so you can complete a certain task, and it's very straightforward. This is obviously a lot more convoluted. So,
Yeah, yeah.
the DM's got to be aware of that going in, I think.
Yes, I think that is the key. You just hit on it right there. This is not for a neophyte game master. This is you
No.
you need to divulge all the absorb all this information, and then you need to be ready to on the fly as your characters act, kind of react to
Yeah.
them and set them up so you can keep the story moving along, I think is
Hmm.
really what it comes down to. So
Yeah.
much more so than I3 was. And if I recall, and again, I haven't done my review yet, it's coming, of I5 is very similar too. I think there's a lot of things kind of going on there as well. And yeah, and I love it. I think it's a challenge, and I do
Hmm.
like the kind of story forward aspect of it. I think that's why I really like this one. I mean, I think I've always liked Pharaoh the best. I thought I
Hmm.
always liked this one the second best, but now I'm not so sure. I need to see what I5 has in there and kind of reevaluate that. But again, it's one of those again, it's the whole all three of them together though are like amazing.
Hmm.
And I'm like that's the way
Oh,
I kind of
yeah.
look at it. They give you so many different things. I love the little
Hmm.
dungeons that we get, the little
Yep.
areas and everything. It's like here's a dungeon here, there's a dungeon there, and everything. I just love that kind of,
Oh, yeah.
literally
Yeah.
sandboxy kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
a setting.
And
So
there's, I think, a lot of sessions to be had from all these.
yes,
If you play these three modules, especially, but even in this module, you're getting your, I think, your play time at the table for your buck. But if you play all three, you really have a meaty campaign here. I think where
oh
the
definitely,
DM, especially of the DM, and there's room for things to be fleshed out here, especially in this particular module.
yes,
The DM could certainly, a lot of these ruins and things that are just mentioned almost in passing, like, well, here's the remains of a city or whatever. The DM could even go in and put their own little flair in there and expand some of those areas. So I think, you could get a year or more play out of these three modules, I think, no problem. So,
easily, yeah. I
definitely
mean,
getting your money's worth, I think.
yeah, I mean, the city of Phoenix just begs to be
Oh, yeah.
mapped and
Yeah.
and then have some things going on in there, even if it's stuff like giant scorpions and things like that,
Yeah.
where just natural things that you have to kind of
Hmm.
overcome or death traps or something. I mean, you just do so many things
Yeah.
with part of it. It's definitely I get that impression that the story kind of took this one over, and like you said, it kind
Hmm.
of some of the encounters are way short and like literally like some things it's like here's a line of read aloud text in one sentence, and it's almost like they had these aspirations what they're going to do, and it was like it got to 32 pages, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And there is precious little art in this book. I counted 10 pieces of art. Almost all of them are quarter page pieces. It's like it's almost half
Hmm.
the art that I3 had. And five of those are in new monsters. So like and the new monsters are presented all in like 2.5 pages at the back. So literally you have
Yeah.
five pieces of art through basically like 30 pages of adventure.
Hmm.
There just was no room, and you didn't get any full page pieces. You really
Yeah.
didn't even get any half page pieces in this. You got tiny little
Yeah.
pieces that literally it looked like they were just kind of jamming in because there was just too much text and there was too much
Hmm.
to kind of and that's the problem when you're kind of doing more of a role-playing centric storyline. It tends to take more words than just there's 10 orcs in a room. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
there tends to be it tends to take a lot more because you don't know how the character is going to handle it. You don't know who they're going to
Hmm.
talk to,
Sure.
and so I
And
definitely
again,
saw that
that's
with
where
the
I see
artwork.
the influence of Hickman. When I said
Yeah,
when I said I felt like the story was pushed through the rules a little bit. It's a
yeah,
weird way to put it, but that's my way of saying, like, yeah, I think it's very story centric now. And again, if you have the right group, if you have a group that really enjoys role playing and you have a DM who can do different voices and play different characters and play somebody like the Sheik or the Sheik's sons or play these certain characters, I think you could have a ride at the table with this. I think you could, with the right group who enjoys a very kind of deeper role play experience as opposed to
yeah,
role playing, I think you could really have a good time with this one. But, like you said, not for the neophyte DM, to be sure, because a new DM is going to need a scorecard, I think, himself to keep this all, keep
definitely.
track of this.
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. without a doubt. So, any other final thoughts before we jump into the top five?
No, I mean you've covered the art. I feel the maps are similar to the first installment. Nice,
Yes.
clean maps. I love the side views. I think
Oh,
that breaks
yes.
things a lot of places that takes something that would have been unintelligible and
Yes.
makes it very easy to understand. So thank you. Even an oblique view in the one case. So
Yes.
you're
Yes.
you're getting all kinds of interesting different views of things so you can understand what's happening, which is necessary, frankly, for some of these traps. So, kudos to the designers for including that. New monsters. Do we actually get any new monsters in this one, or are they all kind of rehashed from the first? I got the sense most of them
They're not.
brought
They're
over.
yeah. You've got the Dust Digger, you've got the Jinn, and you've got the Ifrit, and then you've got the two you've got the cultists and you've got the
Yeah.
Symbians, which are kind of like the regular tribesmen, which are really not new monsters, if you will. I mean, they do have different motivations and whatnot, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I love the way they presented those. I think we actually
Hmm.
have a picture I think that we can put up on that. I hope I forget. But there was very clean the way it was like a quarter page art and the stats and then
Yeah.
like a description underneath it. And it was like boom, and it was
Mhm.
like half a page, half a page, half a page, half a page, and then one under. It's
Yeah.
like it was really slick how that came out and everything.
Hmm.
Again, I'm not really sure how much we really needed that, especially since you can't really fight the Efreet. You're not supposed to fight the
Yeah.
Jinn, obviously. But it was still kind of slick and everything.
Hmm.
Yeah, I guess I wish, like I said, I think I agree with you. It's until I actually saw your notes and talking to you, I not even really realized it was not a very monster centric adventure, and that can be, like I said, that could certainly be off-putting for some, especially when you're dealing with lots of humanoids, and it's like slaughtering humanoids is different than slaughtering owlbears.
Yeah.
Should
Yeah.
it be? It's like, but it is, it feels different. So
Hmm.
but yeah, so yeah, definitely. But the maps were top notch, without a doubt. And the cover art again by Holloway was
Yeah.
fantastic. And
Fantastic.
yeah, and just really does sum up kind of that last scene. Like if your characters get to it
Hmm.
and pull it all off and everything, I mean, that
Oh
is
yeah.
it's just beautiful. I mean, it's really,
Yeah. Yeah.
really caught a nice part of the storyline, I think, definitely.
Yeah.
So
Totally
so
agree.
so let's jump on in it. I think I started first last time, so I think we should have you start first. First of all, do you have any honorable
Okay.
mentions in your top five?
I do. I have one
Okay,
honorable mention.
I do
So
as
my
well.
honorable mention was what was it? Area I11D, the platinum idol. This is just I just thought this was funny. This is the idol where if you kind of press the wrong gem, you can get polymorph via polymorph
Yes.
other. You have the opportunity to become a monkey. And the beautiful thing is it's got three charges. So technically three characters could get turned into monkeys, polymorphed into monkeys, and then they have to make a roll to see whether they basically keep their wits about them or basically totally revert into animalistic traits, which I think is hysterical. It could be very difficult to table, but you got to love it. So it's
Yeah.
so first edition. So yeah, my honorable mention goes to the Platinum Idol because I could not mention that one.
Oh, that's cool. Very cool. My honorable mention is the rumor table, and I'm actually going to say the rumor tables because we get
Hmm.
one in the beginning of the adventure. We also get one at the end, near the NPCs, where it's just kind of like another table of like kind of random bits that some of the NPCs might know and everything. But I actually really kind of, first of all, I love me a good rumor table. I mean,
Oh
always, it's
yeah.
such an old school feel. It's such an amazing thing to
Yep.
have your characters get rumors and everything. But I
Hmm.
love the fact that many of the rumors pertain to different modules in the series. It wasn't
Hmm.
all about the storyline in this adventure. There were even some rumors that pertain to the earlier module, which you've already finished, presumably. But maybe you didn't. Maybe you started in the middle, and maybe you were like, you're going to go do that one after or whatever. But I really kind of enjoyed that, and I enjoyed that the authors pulled out and said this rumor doesn't seem like much right now, but it will come into play later on if they continue in the adventure. So kind of little breadcrumbs and little seeds in there, like, and keep this in
Hmm.
mind, folks, that these adventures came out a year apart. So when you're reading this, if you just bought this when it was released back in 80, was it 82? I think it was 82.
82,
Or
83. I don't know.
83, 83, yeah, I think. It's like you had to wait a year for the next one to come out. So you're getting rumors on what the last adventure is, but you don't know what the last adventure is. And it's like, so it's like it's different reading that now than reading it back then. And you're like, oh wow, that sounds really fascinating. I'm like, I can't wait for
Mhm,
that one to kind of come out. It's like something that maybe should be done more often, where you should kind of
mhm,
you should be seeding some things, like, to try and get people to get excited to buy your next book that's coming out.
mhm.
So that's my one honorable mention, the rumor tables, plural.
Nice. I love a good rumor table. I
Oh
found
yeah,
myself now at the table recently in recent months using rumors a lot more. I think because I've been reading so many of these that I
yeah,
realized what a wonderful, it's just such a fun way to impart information to your players. And like you said,
totally.
that foreshadowing is cool.
Yeah,
Like I'm the type of DM when I'm running one adventure, I do like to put out little trickles of what the next adventure will
exactly,
be down the
exactly.
line. I
Yeah.
think I picked that up from reading too many comic books as a kid where they would stack the plots, and I love that. So all right. So my number five is the is area I-14, the inner temple of Set. This is a hard area. There's a lot of hard areas in this module, but this is a place where you have yet another kind of very dangerous idol that just causes these monsters to start appearing kind of one after the other. And you start with a zombie, but things go downhill quick. And it basically, to say the least, and of course you get whites, and then it kind of leads its way up to, I think a shadow demon is I don't have it in front of me, but I think a shadow demon is the last one, which is pretty strong. Maybe not strong as demons go, but somebody could definitely give characters a run for their money if played right. And meanwhile, you have all these and they're coming out, I think, one around or something. So very soon the characters are going to have quite a conglomeration of monsters to deal with. And the monsters are all trying to push them into the pit. And you have a nice little rule system about the, monsters pushing the characters toward this 100-foot deep pit, and the characters maybe pushing, their way back. And if the characters fall in the pit, they fall 100 feet, and then they actually hit a dimensional gate and go in. They're transported into the first plane of the pandemonium, presumably to be lost. So it's a little completely off the rails. So you have to love it. Very deadly, but very fun. I love the whole push pull mechanic, of fighting on the precipice of this pit. I think it's awesome. I'm going to steal it for something. So that's my number five.
All right, number five, awesome. My number five, we already have a crossover.
Oh boy.
It's Area I-14, the Inner
Sorry,
Temple of
folks.
Set. No, the idol, for everything that you just said. I mean, that is such a cool. It's funny. I totally forgotten about that encounter. I mean, I did not remember that encounter at all. The only thing that you didn't touch on, because you summed it all up really great. That, by the way, the list was zombie, ghoul, ghast, shadow, necrophidius, the skeletal
Mhm.
snakes, white. So you pretty much have all undead here, and then for some reason, then you go to a smoke method, which is like, what, a smoke
Which
method?
is,
And you're like, they're
yeah,
like
not
not
really going
even.
upwards.
That's like a
Yeah.
challenge for first level characters, and then the shadow
Yeah.
demon. So it's like, but yeah, I think really it was more the you can lose your characters. The pandemonium, I think, was the real threat. But the interesting thing, I think, the only thing that you did not mention was the fact that the eyes were what controlling the summoning, and there were
Yes.
rules on,
Yes.
you could remove the eyes by
Right.
poking them out with like a thing, but that took 1 to 10 rounds, and it was like
Or
literally like
destroy them,
one.
right?
Yeah, or you could destroy them.
Yeah.
And if you
That's
destroy
right.
them,
Right.
they only
Right.
had 10
Right.
hit points, -2 AC.
Yeah.
But if you destroyed them, like, they were worth 10,000 GP
Oh
each, but
yeah.
you
There
would
goes your
ruin the
treasure.
gems. Each time you did a point
Yeah.
of damage, you're actually making it worth less and everything. So I
Yeah.
thought that was kind of intriguing. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh
there
no,
was.
I love it.
Yeah, it was a lot going on there, just a lot to really enjoy about that. But
Hmm.
yeah, so our very first crossover, and the
That's
same
funny.
number, I-14, the Inner Temple Set, the Black Idol, or whatever that guy was.
Nice. Yeah, I love the whole thing with the gems as to putting the
Yeah,
players in the position of whether they, and people have to remember, again, first edition treasure was very linked to XP.
yes,
Getting
very
a
much
whole
so.
heap of treasure could mean your character's gaining a
Uh,
whole lot of
Almost
XP.
more so. Two
You know,
two gems worth 10,000 GP each. at 6th to 8th level, that's huge. I mean, that is
Oh
actually
yeah,
that's a lot of
yeah.
experience points. You got to kill
So
a
I could,
lot of ogres
yeah,
to
I
get
could see
that, you
players
know.
at the time not wanting to
Oh
break
yeah,
these gems.
yeah, yeah. No,
So
what was an
uh,
ogre like 200 or 400 experience points,
yeah,
whereas
something, yeah.
you got
No, that's a
basically
lot of XP.
yeah,
So
it's a lot.
it's just, I think now treasure, I don't want to say treasure's dismissed, but it's not at that level of importance, where it
Yeah.
was in the food chain back then, where it was literally kind of like, this much gold equals this much XP, I think, in a lot of players' heads. So yeah, great point. All right, my number four, and I'm gonna wonder if we're gonna hit a crossover with this one. We'll have to see. Is area I-9. This is the cross and double cross area. This is the sort of trapped corridor. If we could put up the side view, trap view, I guess is the best view of it. This is a trapped corridor where if you open a door at one side, there's a trap door and it releases a white, but simultaneously a mist comes out and kind of obscures the area. But then potentially in the other, because it's a cross-shaped area, you could potentially open a door and trigger something where, or walk toward a door and trigger something where the whole floor tilts. And I love tilting floors. I have since the Tomb of Horrors. And that's where you get this wonderful cross section here where you can basically slide right down into a pit that's below another room. And it kind of links up nicely with another room. So a lot going on, but again, the way you get that beautiful cross section with the regular map combined lets the DM understand exactly what's going on. It's a very devious little trap in a whole place full of traps. So I love it. I think it's a wonderful devious little area, for the characters where multiple traps can be triggered. So that's my number four, the cross and double
Okay.
cross.
All right. My number four, I think, is going to surprise you a little bit. So it's
Okay.
area I-17, the library. This is the
Mm.
infamous ash pile room. So, really two things really, because the room itself, there's really not a whole lot special with it, like you mentioned, but it's where you get Martek's map, which I love Martek's map in this adventure. It's so
Hmm.
cool because it's kind of a map of hieroglyphics, so you don't really know what it is. You can try and figure out, oh, this is probably the Oasis of the White Palm, and this is probably here, this is probably there. But I love the fact that again, there's hieroglyphics on it, and there's a chance you might not translate it, but since you're gonna probably you got 6th to 8th level characters in there, you probably have comprehend languages or tongues in there somewhere. You're probably gonna figure it out, but it gives you the clues on how you need to kind of solve what you need to do and where you need to go. So it's very important. But I also love kind of the whole because one of the star gems is located here, like I said, just kind of randomly in
Hmm.
a pile of ash,
Yeah.
which is kind of sad. But I like the fact two things. I like the fact that on that map there are several ruins that are not detailed, that are left for the game
Hmm.
master to do whatever they want. And I like that. And especially in an
Yeah.
adventure like this, maybe that's that opportunity where, hey, you want to go beat up some monsters for a little while,
Hmm.
here's a little side quest. Go beat up some monsters or something like that, or go, whatever. But I really like the star gems themselves. I think it's kind of, and I kind of,
Hmm.
so I'm kind of wrapping the star gems up in with this room because the
Hmm.
room kind of doesn't stand on its own. But I like the fact that there's these 3 star gems. First of all, there's the name Star Gem just
Hmm.
sounds so awesome. I mean, it just
Yeah.
sounds,
Yeah.
it's just, I don't know what it is. It's great.
Yeah.
I'm surprised
Yeah.
that Star Gems never appears in one of the titles of these adventures. I mean,
Yeah.
because kind of a missed opportunity, I think, actually.
Yeah.
Because, and especially when you look at like Oasis of the White Palm, yeah, all right, I get it. Lost Tomb of Martek, cool. But, maybe like the first one should have been, the Tomb of the Star Gem or something like that, or the Lost
Yeah.
Tomb of the Star Gem or something. So I love the fact that you've got these magical gems. They each do something different. One's a gem of seeing, one's a gem that can cast Cure Serious Wounds 3 times a day, and then the other one is this one where like if a magic user meditates with it, you can actually get spells back. Like your spells, people didn't have spells. Well, I guess they kind of had spell slots last back in that
Yeah.
edition, but yeah, you could actually like get rememorize a spell that you've already cast,
Hmm.
and it was kind of like a way to kind of get around the whole resting mechanics and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just really, for some reason, I always think of the star gems, and they were so crucial to the third module and everything, so I was like, I really, so I kind of wrapped that one in that. So this
Hmm.
one's kind of all over the place. But I'll call it I-17, the library, and the Star Gems of Mopalar.
Okay, I like it. And I agree. Love the Star Gems. Love the title. Calling them Star Gems. I've always thought that was a cool name. Looks, it sounds like something legendary that you're going to go after. My number three, and this is more of a faucet, and maybe it's something kind of simple, but just the whole palm sign and amulet, the way they go together. I like the little puzzly aspect of it. It gives the players one of those aha kind of moments, where they can figure out something because you look at the princess's palm sign and it looks like nothing.
Yep.
But then, to me at least, once I look at the amulet, you can kind of tell something's going on and you can kind of
Yep.
make out words, maybe even guess what some of them are, but not all of it. And then once you have the two, it just the way it goes together is cool. I don't know if it's, hieroglyphic, realistic, or whatever, but who cares? It's a fun little puzzle. I love things like that more and more. I like bringing real tricks or real things like that to the table, real puzzles, and just dropping them on the table and letting the players, figure things out if they can. And I think that's something where you could do that. You could present it to the players as handouts and
Yep.
kind of have at it. So that kind of hands-on kind of puzzly stuff, as opposed to just making a few rolls, I think is good stuff. So that's my number three, is just the whole aspect of the palm sign and the amulet, the way they lock together.
Yeah, I strongly considered putting it on my list. I did not, but I love me a good handout, a player handout. And like you said, whenever you can show and not necessarily have to tell, always
Yep.
better. When you can give
Oh yeah.
players a piece of paper that has something on it that they can literally for hours and
Hmm.
sessions be looking at,
Yeah.
it's like, remember that little, remember that symbol that you found way back, 3 sessions ago? It's like now all of a sudden it's important. So
Mhm.
love that. So yeah, so all right, that's great. So my number three, also not an encounter, what we would definitely consider a faucet, and also kind of a little bit of a cheat with a two-parter thing here. So this is the NPC knowledge sections that were
Mhm.
included in the adventure. And then also kind of going hand in hand with that, the NPC section at the back of the book, which I thought was really good. So some of the more important NPCs actually had full write-ups in the back of the book where they had their stats, a description, talked about their motives a little bit, and also what their knowledge. But I loved it in encounters when you got to this was one of those sections that was included in
Mhm.
I3 Pharaoh, where you had monster, trap, trick, lore, and all that. But you had a section called character. And in I3, it wasn't really used much. It was more talking about your NPC and your interactions with the NPC. Well, obviously, as we've been talking here, this was used in spades in this adventure, and I thought it was used in pretty good effect. And they would always talk about this is the NPC, and then they would say, and the NPC knows the following, and then they would give you
Mhm.
a list of, and usually it was 3 4 different things, and it was things that you could certainly weave into a conversation. If you weren't that confident as a game master, you could just give all that information out and everything. I do wish there were bullet points. I don't think bullet points were a huge thing back in the 80s, as far as like being used. Like today, PowerPoint and bullet points are really a thing. So I think
Mhm.
it's an obvious thing that, like, from a layout standpoint, like bullet pointing some of that stuff would have been really, really handy, I think, to help the game master running it at the time. But nothing that you couldn't, like, God forbid, if you marked up your old adventures, and I know some game masters did, they would highlight things or they would underline things. I wouldn't, but like I could see certainly doing something like that to call attention to it. So, and
Mhm.
there were in the meat of the module, there were 10 NPCs that had these bullet points, if you will, of information, and then there was all the NPCs at the back, and they all had their little list of
Mhm.
information too. So I really liked that presentation of the data, if
Mhm.
you will, and the information. I just thought that was, we talked about how you needed to be a really good game master to run this. I think that was something that really made it easier to run this, was
Yeah.
doing
Oh
that.
yeah.
So I really liked that part of it. So I'll call it the NPC
Mhm.
knowledge and the NPC capsules at the back of the adventure. Number three.
Definitely essential for this particular installment, to be sure, to help keep that. Like I said, that's the kind of stuff that I look for. And yeah, bullet points. Maybe it's something about the our attention span in this decade or
Yeah.
something, but give me those bullet points. So my number four is area
Number two.
K15. What's that? Oh,
Your
number
number
two. What
two.
am I saying? Number four? Where am I
Yeah.
at? I don't know where I'm at. I want to rerun them in my head or something. My number two is area K15, the treasury area, which is, I guess, sort of one of your ultimate areas. So Indiana Jones, that's all I thought of when I read this, is
Yep.
just, one or two Indiana Jones movies with him running across a trapped floor, and the stones giving way. And, in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and maybe even the first Indiana Jones when he was grabbing the idol, because there's even something about swapping out, the idol, and swapping out the treasure here for a certain weight. I love the whole thing. It's very devious. It's hard. Characters having to figure out where the real floor is, and there's, I guess, acid pits, I think, where it isn't. And then technically the real good places of floor could then be trapped by these petrification beams if you're not careful. So there's a lot going on here. And then there's even like a secondary trap. So you've got all these, situations with the beams of light and a lot of stuff going on here. But I think it's a very cool, memorable room. Again, it screams Indiana Jones to me, which is never a bad thing. So yeah, an easy number two, area K15, the treasury room.
Nice. All right. My number two, also not an encounter and a facet. This is the Oasis factions. I really again, there's a big part of the adventure. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably the first, I'd say, third of the adventure or so thereabouts. Is you're just in the Oasis and you're kind of learning about all these different factions and that they're
Mm-hmm.
all kind of at odds with each other. You have the Thune cultists, which also just sounds like the Thuggies from Indiana Jones. They're converted. They were the converted tribesmen, and now they've seen the light of the one true God. And they're at war with the regular tribesmen, and they're a secret religious order, and they're just up to no good. They're just the evil bad guys. You've got the Sheik loyalists, which is funny. The Sheik loyalists are like, they're loyal to the Sheik. Well, no, duh. It's like, but that's pretty much all they tell you about that. Basically, it's like if you're not
Yeah.
one of the other factions, you're kind of loyal to the Sheik. Um, and they're constantly trying to find where the cultists are meeting. They know the cultists are there somewhere in the Oasis. They just haven't figured it out yet. Then you have the slave traders, and the slave traders are very interesting because they apparently taken over the Sand Voyagers Guild, and they're using that as a front. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that idea of the
Yeah.
slave dealers working right underneath their noses kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an established, oh, it couldn't be the Sand Voyagers Guild. They've been up and up and up and respectable forever. And then so you've got those are the three main factions that are all kind of in. I
Mm-hmm.
love how they kind of spell it all out in the beginning, in the introduction to the Oasis, and they kind of give you the rundown of what all their motivations are and all that. I love it, and I really it harkens back to B4, the adventure we're not allowed to talk about because Rick's playing it. But it takes the B4 factions kind of to the next level, in my opinion. B4, the
Mm-hmm.
factions were there, and then you did learn a little bit about them, but these, I think, it's a little bit more embroiled in the plot. Then the Ifrit shows up and actually steals the princess and kind of upsets the balance, and everybody's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
really at odds and tense. And it's like there's just this tension in the
Mm-hmm.
Oasis, and it's like
Yeah.
that's where the stakes are. The stakes of that
Mm-hmm.
first third of the adventures that is the tension and the push and pull of the factions. And
Yeah.
again, if you've got a great game master and if you can pull that off, like that's
Mm-hmm.
great. I mean, that is great play. I mean, again, maybe you just want to get them to the dungeon and you want to get them into the traps and get them into the combats and everything. But if your group really yearns for
Yeah.
dealing with factions and NPC interactions and everything, I mean, it's fantastic. So that's
Oh
my number
yeah.
two. All the
Nice.
different Oasis factions going on. So
I agree. And there is the kind of narrative beauty in this. Something that, I can say that I do like really about this module is not only is the Oasis an interesting place just as it stands, but the fact that the characters are really kind of entering the Oasis when it's at a boiling point, when the tensions
yes,
of the group
yep,
are erupting. You've got another layer of something going on, that you don't just have an interesting place with factions, but you have an interesting place with factions where something is happening. There's are, kind of machinations in play where there's a tension in the air. And I think there's even a description somewhere in the module where they tell you that, like that things are kind of at a simmering point in the Oasis. And I love that, because that the characters, of course, are arriving just as things are boiling over, and it's wonderful. All right, my number one, this was an easy one for me. Is Area K. We'll see if there's a crossover or not. Area K-12. This is the Pits of Everfall.
Yes. Well, I'm gonna say it
I
right
know we
now.
have.
It's a crossover. It's my number one also. Go for it. So
Yeah, I guess that was
you knew it.
inevitable.
I
Um,
foreshadowed it last time. So
there we go. So yeah, there's just that wonderful, thank goodness, wonderful vertical graphic there where we have a nice side view of what's going on here. It's just such a cool, any kind of one of these endless fall kind of reverse gravity things. You have seen that gimmick used in a number of early modules, but here it's employed really well. It's something where the players have to figure it out because it's really their means of getting from one level
yep.
of the dungeon to the other. It can provide puzzle element. And what I really love the most is you're given 3 separate shafts on this first level, and each shaft is a little different. One shaft
Yep.
has got some rubble that's falling in it that could potentially hurt the players. One shaft has some valuable items. So now players are seeing, this treasure zipping by them several times, and maybe they have to figure out how to grab it or how to get their hands on this, magical armor or whatever. And then, last but not least, in the third shaft, you've got undead live mummies
Yeah.
falling past the characters, and obviously that could cause all kinds of situations if the characters were to collide with these mummies in the shaft or, run into them somehow in this vertical, endlessly falling with these mummies fighting them or what have you. So it sets up 3 different shafts with this magical trap, all of which are a little different. And all of which, I can see the players sitting there at the table trying to work this out, saying, how are we going to, we can see the entrance to the next level. How are we going to do this? And, making the players kind of figure this all out, how they're going to approach this area safely or how they're going to get the treasure that's falling past them endlessly. It just sets up a lot of cool table talk. So I
Yeah.
love it. It's imaginative as heck. So yeah, super easy number one, not even a question. Area K-12, Pits of Everfall.
Yep, and yeah, I'll just jump right into it. My number one as well. Like I said, I foreshadowed it last time where I
Yeah,
said that this was
that's
I
right.
thought this encounter was in I3, and I was wrong. It was in this
That's
adventure.
right. And I
Um,
forgot that you said that
yeah,
last time, but
yeah.
you're right. You
So
did say that. You called
and
it.
like I said, this like we talk about this all the time when we bring up these classic adventures. What's the one encounter that or the one thing that you always think of when you get the title of the adventure? Well,
Oh
now that
yeah.
I remember that Oasis of the White Palm has this encounter in it, I will
Hmm.
always remember it now. But this is I when you tell me Desert of Desolation, I think of this pit. I think of
Hmm.
the pit of Everfall. It's just a cool concept. Yeah, and you're right, it's not something that they blunder into. It's not something that they can avoid because they
Hmm.
have to use it to get up to the next level. And that's, I think, the brilliant part of it. Yeah, is it ham-fisted a little bit, but that's
Hmm.
part of the challenge. Part of the challenge is you see the pit, you see what's going on. You know, might not exactly know what the thing is until you actually fall yourself, but you have to determine now, how are we going to get around this? Oh, and look up there, there's another way, there's another passage coming in. And again, at all the different points of the dungeon, so they all lead to completely different areas. It's a fascinating way, instead of there just being a stairway going to the next level of the dungeon. I mean, it's just, I
Yeah,
love it for all those reasons. And that's why that's totally my number one too, for also everything you said. So the Pits of Everfall, area K12, A, B, and C. Um, cool. So there
nice.
you have it, folks. Oasis of the White Palm, the second module in the Desert of Desolation series, which is a great series. If you've not read these adventures or run them, you really need to check these out
Oh
on
yeah,
Drive Through RPG and get them, because I mean they are really good. I mean, just really kind of started bringing that next phase of adventures, coming from the classics of TSR. So definitely check
totally.
that out. Rick, tell them what you got to tell them.
Sure. Well, we are going to coming back at you with our next show in October. Yeah, it's going to be October already.
Yes.
On October 8th at 8 p.m., we will be back with the last installment of the Desert of Desolation series, I-5, The Lost Tomb of Martek, which is another really good module. Again, just get your hands on this series and read it, folks. It's so good. As always, we're thrilled that you could join us. Please give us a like, give us a follow. If you're watching us later on YouTube, feel free to ring that bell if you haven't already, and subscribe so you know when our new videos are coming your way. And as always, keep the comments coming. We love hearing what you have to say.
Yes, history professor asking if we're going to Gamehole Con. Sadly, no. I will be
No,
at PAX
unfortunately.
Unplugged in December, but I will not be at Gamehole Con. There was a time there was a brief moment when it looked like I might be going to Gamehole Con, but then it just turned out that I'm not going this year. Maybe next year. We have a lot of exciting stuff. And also, folks, I just want to throw out there too that we have only a couple of shows left this year. We have next show on October 8th. We have one more show at the end of October, and we have one more after that. And I'm just going to throw a little tease out there. That final show, which is going to be in November, there's going to be a big announcement. So I'll start teasing that now. So you might want to check that show out because I think you're going
Don't
to
miss
be
it.
pretty excited. So yeah, so I think it'll be quite surprising. So Rick and I
Yeah.
are working on something. So
We're
uh,
always cooking up something, right?
always, we're always cooking something up. We've been in discussions the whole year about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, so please check us out, obviously on October 8th. And we'll be right back, same bat time, same bat channel, same bat day, and everything else. So everybody have a great night. And we'll see you next time on the other side.
Good night, folks.